Thank you, Senator. I don't think you'll hear a lot of disagreement here about needing to reduce drug prices under the proper circumstances, but that should not come at the cost of innovation, because the cost of a drug that's not invented and brought to market after lots of research and development is basically infinite. And the cost on the American healthcare system and the taxpayer of having diseases go untreated is extraordinarily high. So that's point number one. Point number two, there are two sides of the chart that you're showing. The main problem is that there is tremendous free riding overseas on American innovation. And as a result of that, the cost of innovation is borne disproportionately by the American taxpayer. So instead of engaging in a race to the bottom and decimating the American innovation ecosystem, we should work hard to force our trading partners to bear their fair cost for that innovation.
Well, the race to the bottom, I mean, the American innovation system when it comes to prescription drugs is not going to do American patients much good if they can't afford their drugs.
The reality is that 9 out of 10 prescription drugs in the United States are filled with generic substitutes, far higher than the average in the OECD. In the end, I agree with you, but the way to do it is to force our trading partners to bear their fair cost, which will decrease the cost to the American taxpayer.
I wanted to say to the various companies who hold the patents on these various drugs and are selling them that you can set whatever price you want in the international market. It is a global market, but you cannot price gouge the American people.
Well, there are foreign governments that prevent that, and that's off the topic here, and I'm not an expert in that issue.
Well, why shouldn't we prevent it? I mean, this is my point. I mean, why are we allowing the American people to get the shaft here? Other governments are protecting their citizens from high drug prices, but we don't, and we're told constantly, well, that's the price of innovation, so you just have to suck it up, Americans, and pay the cost on, oh, you can't afford your drugs, you can't afford your insurance, you can't afford to go to the doctor anymore, but we've got a great healthcare system, it's all innovative. It doesn't do people much good if they can't actually get to the doctor. You're going to say something, Mr. Lee, and then the chairman, I think, has had about enough of me.
I want to get back on, and if it relates to para, you can speak. If it relates to the broader issue, I think it's something that we've debated ad nauseum. And quite honestly, the cost of a drug and a therapy that could save millions that was never invented is zero. Yes. Okay? I was a research and development manager back in the mid-'80s. When I started looking, it was in technology. But when I had a smart person come into my office and say, we have a promising new technology, I need thousands of dollars to invest in it to bring it to market, my first question was, number one, do we have is it technologically viable? Number two, are we going to have a long enough horizon to recover our investment to make this work? And if the answer was a question, that R&D person went back to R&D and worked on another project, and I didn't authorize that project. Now, if you want a real working example on when government gets wrong, and this is all I'll do before I get back to para, on artificial drug pricing, go listen in to some of the minutes of the board meeting notes about 6 months after the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, when they noted that 60% of their small molecule research budget had been slashed. Then what happens to the people that were hoping on that innovation to save them? So the problem with Washington is we have an oversimplified approach to solving a legitimate problem. It is not just about telling the pharmaceutical companies to cut their prices, unless you want to cut the enormous benefit that they have to the American people. When people get sick anywhere in the United States, they're more likely going to want to come to the United States, or anywhere in the world, they're more likely to want to come to the United States more than anywhere else because we do invest and we do innovate. That's right. If people want to have a serious, non-political discussion about reducing healthcare prices, you need to get everybody in the healthcare value chain into the barbershop, and everybody needs a haircut. But if you do it arbitrarily and you're driven politically, you're going to be having the same discussion 20 years from now, and the patients of America suffer. You need to bring in the litigious environment that we have here, the regulatory environment that we have here, mirror that against other countries. The cost to actually provide the drug in various jurisdictions is a meaningful part of that discussion. So if we want to have that discussion, a non-political, really nerdy, detailed, lots of work sessions, count me in. But if we want to have the beat up anybody in the value chain discussion, boy, there's a long list of people that get harmed if we don't get it right. Now,
Mr. Chairman, might I intervene for 1 minute?
Yeah,
could I ask?
But I'm not here. I am here, actually, ironically.
But Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lee was going to answer my question.
Ironic, and Mr. Lee, if it does relate to PARA, if it moves in, if it somehow relates to PARA, please proceed.
Because this bill is not related to the issue that the
Exactly,
senator,
but I'm just trying to see how
senator
you
is the
relate
lead
that to
co-sponsor on the bill that would address the issue that he wants to talk about, but that's not the topic of this hearing.
Yeah, I understand. So, Mr. Lee, to the extent that you can respond to Mr. Hawley's question in the context of how it relates to the plain text of the PARA bill, rock on.
All right, I will do my best. I promise I will get to PURA. And this is an issue that it's actually not just limited to pharmaceutical drugs. High prices are something that Americans are really struggling with in a lot of different areas, pharmaceutical drugs being one. And what I would say is that we really can have it both ways. We can have a patent system that incentivizes innovation, and then we can have patents that have limits that already exist in the law, limits on those patents to make sure that, whatever benefits.
But Mr. Lee, you did hear that the vast majority of drugs being dispensed are generic equivalent. You know how they become generic, right?
Right, and that's a situation where it's working, where a generic was able to come into the market. The limit on the patent, whether it's the temporal limit because it expired or because it shouldn't have been granted in the first place and it was invalid and it was invalidated at, say, the Patent Trial and Appeal Board or someplace like that. That's examples where limits are being enforced and patents are not overextended beyond where they should be.
I'm not dismissing what Senator Hawley says in terms of a pricing problem, but somebody who's worked in this space for a while, served clients in this space, and have talked to the hospitals, the patients, the pharmacy benefit managers, the insurers, the healthcare providers. All of those are in the value chain. All of them are part of the solution, and if we go at it in pieces, we're going to have a suboptimal result where patients suffer.
Was that the extent of your answer, though, Mr.? I'm just trying to get an answer to my question, Mr. Chairman. And is that it?
Mr. Lee, would you submit that for the record? Would you submit a response for the record?
Mr. Chairman, you basically just testified. I've never seen a hearing where the chairman testifies for the witnesses. I know you don't like my questions.
Mr. Hawley, I've never seen a hearing where the entire discussion was off the topic of the bill. Do you have any specific questions on PARA? Because this is actually a committee hearing on trying to improve patent eligibility. Do you have any questions on that matter?
I've got these questions that I can ask any question I want, Mr. Chairman.
You can within the 5 minutes.
And you just talk through his answer at the end. I just wanted an answer to my question.
Mr. Hawley, your time had expired when we continued the discussion.